Chris Rodrigue, Director of Operations, AMETEK Rotron. Welcome to the Council of Industry podcast.
Hey, Harold. Thanks for having me.
So, AMETEK Rotron, tell us about what you guys make, where you are, what you do.
Sure. So we are part of AMETEK, obviously. We are in the aerospace and defense division of AMETEK. We're up here in Woodstock, New York. Been on the same site for about 75 years. So we're not new to the area.
No.
We're one of the largest employers in the area. And we make fans, blowers, and motors that are used in various either commercial aviation or defense applications.
So, fans, blowers, give us some examples of where they're used.
Sure. So, anything that creates heat, we dissipate heat. That's kind of the simplest way to put it. So, everything from ground-based radar systems to fighter jets to avionics cooling and everything in between. So, we make fans from about the size of a silver dollar up to probably the size of a large pizza and everything in between.
Okay. A large pizza. That's like a delicious fan.
Right.
So what goes into making a fan? And they're all like basically a motor and blades. Tell us a little bit about the different ones.
Yeah, so we're a vertically integrated organization here. So what that means is we do everything from the design, the building, the production, the testing, and then actually the shipping. So we do a lot more than just assembly. So most of what we do is a variant on a Rotron design. Some of the mil specs that are actually still in use today were actually written here at Rotron back in the 60s and 70s. And we do everything from the casting. So we start with, raw materials like ingots and bar stock, and we cast parts, cases, and props that are actually used inside of the fans. We do the winding of the stators, which is essentially the motor that's going to drive the fan. We do some electronic assembly here, and then we do the actual physical assembly, putting the fan together. And then we have quite a bit of different types of testing capabilities here. So airflow, temperature cycling based on where it's going to end up, even some salt fog testing. Some of our fans go into some pretty harsh environments, as you would expect. So we can do some of the testing here. Now, we don't do it all here. We do send some out to third-party labs when necessary, but we're kind of a soup to nuts shop here from the beginning to end.
And are the customers commercial aviation, defense contractors? Is that primarily who you're serving?
Any of those, if you've heard of them before, we probably serve them.
Okay,
So
fair
we
enough.
Yeah, we sell directly to DLA, but we also sell to, the big ones you've heard of, the Lockheeds, the Raytheons, the L3s, all of them. And then on the commercial side, the Boeings, the Airbuses, the Sikorsky's,
Okay.
et cetera, Gulfstream,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So, you mentioned the company's 75 years old. Obviously, you haven't been there that long, but was the original product line? Was it defense related, or kind of the origin story of the company, if you know it?
Yeah, so the gentleman who started the company, his last name was Van Ryan. He was a Dutch engineer. He actually used to vacation up here. He lived and worked in New York City and would vacation up in the area and kind of took a liking to the area.
You are in a good spot.
It absolutely is. Yeah, we're kind of tucked away in the woods. You could drive by us, every single day and not even know we were tucked away back here. But you hear about people starting a business or an organization in their garage. He actually started it in his barn. So the barn it's a building that's still here. It's actually our maintenance shed right now, where our maintenance folks hang out. That was moved in the 60s, and as the business grew over the years, other buildings were put up. So we have kind of a campus environment. We're not all under one large building. We're on about 95 acres here with about 16 different smaller buildings that encompass Rotron. And as the business grew over the years, it changed hands a few times. It was procured by EG&G from the Van Ryan family in the 70s, and then AMETEK took us over in the late 90s. And there was a commercial division back in the early 80s. There was a offshoot up in Olive, and there was another offshoot up in Saugerties that have since closed or been sold off. But this has really been the heart of the organization for 75 years, and still producing fans right where it all started.
So you said soup to nuts and vertically integrated. So, and then I had the pleasure to walk through the facility a couple of times recently, as just a few weeks ago. There's a lot of different operations, different skilled workers, different things happening there. You also mentioned you were one of the larger manufacturing employers in the county and the region. So what kind of roles do you have, from engineering on down to, entry level assembly?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and most of what we do is varying on our own design. So obviously the engineering piece of it, right? Application engineering on the front end, design engineering, and the manufacturing engineering. So we have folks, coming right out of school, college, young bright engineers. We've actually in the last couple of years we've had quite a bit of turnover. We've had a lot of people with 40 plus years experience working here at Rotron retire. We're bringing in the new generation, if you will, a lot of new folks, the YouTube generation, if you will, or the
Yeah.
those folks are coming on board. So a lot of engineers coming in. Our machine shops, we're bringing in a lot of machinists, programmers, folks that can run CMM machines as well as CNC machines. And we also do some of the, I guess you would call it old school tool and die making type operations here. So we have a few folks that they don't do much on a CNC machine, but they're using an old traditional press or lathe that you would have seen used about 40 years ago. Winding stators is still very manual. So we're not doing it, we haven't automated a lot of it. It's very unique and specialized for each of the orders. We're by no means a high volume, low mix shop. We're kind of the other way. We're a job shop, if you will. And that's the way I kind of look at it. We make thousands of different final assembly part numbers, about 25 different product families. So from those 25 different product families, I think of them as, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, and then all kinds of different sprinkles on top, depending on what your
Okay.
application is going to be. So we have everything from general assembly through engineering and kind of everything in between. A lot of new, fresh faces. We've done a lot of work with obviously Council of Industries and some of the local programs in the county, Ulster BOCES, Pathways Academy, and we're starting to see a lot of those folks who we started working with
Yeah.
many years ago now start to come on board as
It's
actual
nice.
employees.
It's
Yeah,
nice to see that, isn't it? To see that connection for sure.
absolutely.
So you're talking a little bit about those various workforces in the production side. Do you do anything in the sales and marketing and the accounting for? Is that there, or is that something that AMETEK does for you, or is something in between?
Yeah, our customer service department, who's actually taking in the purchase orders, is actually on site here. Procurement as well, so buying all of our raw materials, that happens in house as well. Our quality department's here. Most of our sales folks, though, are not based here. They're spread out regionally, either across the United States or across the world. So our fans are not only sold domestically but internationally in certain respects. So outside of sales, pretty much everything else is housed here still.
And I think you mentioned there that a lot of the defense industry is in California, and so that makes sense that there would be some folks back out in that neck of the woods.
Yep, absolutely. So we're here in Woodstock, obviously, but we do have a sister site in El Cajon, California. And we build most of the fans here. We'll send the fans out to El Cajon and they'll actually install them into larger systems, larger racks that would go onto a submarine. We actually have a couple that are actually used in PCB board manufacturing
Hmm.
for some of those type of customers for wafer production and that type of stuff.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yep. So they're much smaller out there in El Cajon. They're about 35 people, but they're taking the fans that we're building here and they're actually integrating them into different systems.
Oh, interesting. So I joked you haven't been there 75 years, but you have been with the company for a
A
few.
few. Yeah, a few.
How did you get started?
So yeah, interesting kind of career path for myself. So I grew up in Orange County. I went to Monterey High School. I went to SUNY Albany undergrad with a major in biology of all things.
Oh,
Kind of career path change partially through, but I minored in business. I really enjoyed business. I was about 3 years into my college career, and I said, I really like business better than that some of this lab work we're doing. I was thinking maybe pre med, but the business really grabbed me, and that's really what I kind of I steered my direction towards. So I went on to get a master's degree at the University of Maine. So I went from SUNY Albany directly to Maine. My family's from Maine originally, so I knew the
okay.
area well. And when I was up in Maine, I actually got an internship with the Maine Manufacturing Extension Partnership.
Okay.
So the MEP system was started in the early 90s. It comes under NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And it was set up to really work with small and medium-sized manufacturers to really become more efficient, stop jobs in companies from going overseas back then. And that was my first kind of exposure to manufacturing in a lot of different respects. So it was great because I got to see a lot of different organizations early in my career. I wasn't, stuck behind a desk anywhere. I was going to different companies, small mom and pops, one day, and then it was maybe General Dynamics the next day to work on a Kaizen event or a value stream mapping event. And that was kind of my first exposure to Lean, Six Sigma, those type of philosophies. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed being able to go into these different organizations and said, hey, we can become more efficient. What is waste? What is flow? Point of view storage, and all those good things that Lean brings to the
That,
table.
yeah, that manufacturing lingo that people
That's
people like
right.
to use. Absolutely.
That's right.
That's great. So how did you end up with Rotron?
So I actually, when I finished my internship there, I was offered a position out in California for a year with the MEP system. So I went out there for a year, missed the East Coast, liked the seasons, liked the weather change. I was living in Santa Monica and it was 72 every single day for 6 months straight, and I just couldn't take
Some
it
people
anymore.
really like that. Just saying.
That's
Not
right.
me, but there are some people out there that really like that.
So yeah, so I moved back and I continued to do the same thing. I traveled for about 10 years doing consulting,
Okay.
lean process improvement type consulting, kind of all over, and didn't specifically stick with manufacturing. We did some with government up in Canada, even did some healthcare type lean applications.
Interesting.
And then once I got married and my wife and I were expecting our first child, it was, you're not traveling anymore. She was traveling as well at the time. So it was, you got to find something close to home. So you're sleeping in our own bed every night. And, with my son coming along. So I looked around, what was within driving distance. I still live down in Orange County, Western Orange County now. And I came across AMETEK. I had done work with a different division of AMETEK many years ago. I said, oh, I recognize the name AMETEK, but I wasn't familiar with Rotron. So I came up here. I met the director of ops at that time. I was about 10 years ago now. And I was brought on initially to do CI type events, continuous improvement events across the facility. So I did that for about a year and a half. I kind of jumped over the fence into quality and I became the quality manager for a couple of years. Jumped back over the fence into production and became
Okay.
the production manager. And then about 4 years ago, became the director of ops.
Nice. That's great. And that's around the time I think you joined our board. So that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, you talk about continuous improvement and your lean stuff. Are you credentialed in the Lean Six Sigma stuff, or is that like a self-taught thing, or, where are you with that process? That's self-taught,
Yeah,
but
so a lot of it was, a lot of it was on the job training for me. More so lean, less so Six Sigma path. So, we had our own. The company I worked for was actually called TimeWise Solutions for a number of years, and we actually had our own product line of lean products, if you will. So
okay.
we would go to different companies, and before we'd start a value stream map or a Kaizen event, we would run folks through a simulation where they were working in this clock factory, and there was 4 rounds of simulation, and we would introduce these different lean concepts throughout the day. So round one is kind of a train wreck. People are pointing fingers at each other.
Right. Right.
I don't know what's going on. I don't have work instructions. I'm not sure what's going on, but it's Joe's fault or it's Susan's fault. And throughout the day, though, you start to see the folks, you introduce these different concepts and people start to apply them in this real world simulation. And after the 4 rounds, they're cranking out these clocks and they're not working necessarily any harder. They're working smarter. They're understanding waste. They're understanding process flow, and they're understanding that the real key to it, though, is to see people, start to think and go, oh, I see what happened here in the simulation. So I can apply that to my daily job and what I do each day. And it's not just manufacturing, lean doesn't
Right.
only apply on the shop floor. There's a variety of other places where you can apply those principles.
Yeah, we see a lot of when we do some yellow belt training, and we see a lot
Mhm.
of examples of customer service and really order taking, input, and material handling, all that stuff. We see a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned the season, the Hudson Valley Pathways Academy. I know that you've done a little bit of lean training for those kids.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I was approached. It was probably 5 years ago, I think. Steve Casa stopped by one day and he said, hey, listen, I'm with Pathways Academy and we're trying to figure something out to do with the kids to get them engaged with local industry and work with folks. I said, I used to teach this kind of lean simulation in my previous life, and it's very engaging. It gets you away from the traditional, just look at a PowerPoint, 50 slides or 100 slides of course a day. It's very hands-on, and I'm a visual learner, and I got to do it. I got to take it apart. I got to put it back together. I got to try to break it until I can
Right.
really figure out what's going on with it. So
Right.
that class is perfect for that. And he said, hey, you know what? That sounds great. And we did it with, I think it was their chapter twos, the first one we did. And it went off great. They really enjoyed it. And so I did that probably, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 times each semester for a bunch of years. And they actually have the course themselves there now. So we've actually got them their own training materials and kit, and they actually run it themselves now. So I've kind of stepped back from it, but
Oh, I've trained those trainers.
that's right.
Honestly, of the things that happen at that PTech school, the early college high school, that I think is one of those transformative things for those students is particularly if you get them when they're, you say chapter twos, which is basically
Yeah,
14 or 15-year-olds. It's got to be, they haven't formed any bad habits yet,
that's
So,
right. They're moldable.
yeah, they're going to come into some workplaces and they're going to be like, no, 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 this. You guys, why are you doing that? Look at all that waste.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I probably taught that class, that 8 hour session 100 times over the years, and
Mm,
I swear every time I do it, someone comes up with something different. What if we did this, or could I put this here and do it this way? And what if we did this in front of that? Would that, maybe we get better flow this way? We'll reduce some of our waiting waste or some of our transportation waste. It's always amazing, especially with the young kids coming along. And I'm kind of I'm an old fart by now, and thinking of how things used to be, very paper based, and I call them the YouTube generation. They're
right.
coming up with PlayStations and all of that, and trying to automate everything. And they've got some great ideas, and it's always great to see, even building these little clocks, how those ideas just kind of blossom, and then they can get applied in real world situations. And you know that's probably the biggest thing. Anytime I'm asked what brings, what do you look for in an employee or a new employee coming in, and problem solving. I mean,
Mm,
that's probably the biggest thing. One, show up, just be here on time,
right.
and show up every day. That's probably the best thing they can do. But secondarily to that is problem solving, understanding how to break down a problem and how to attack it, because that's, regardless of what industry you end up in, problem solving is probably the that key to all of it, if you will. If more people
Yeah.
problem solve well, instead of just kind of triaging and firing
Right.
here and firing there. That's huge. When someone can come in and problem solve, that's an employee that I always think is going to do
Yeah.
really well.
And that is you kind of anticipated my question, but and that's something at every level. I mean, an organization like
Oh yeah,
yours, right? I mean, obviously engineers, you need that, but you also want somebody at their workstation just to, if something's slightly amiss,
yeah,
rather than throwing it out or immediately going to their supervisor or whatever, just trying to work out, to make it right.
absolutely. Yeah, the folks doing it each day and touching it and living it, they know the problems, and a lot of times they know the solutions. They're just looking for a mechanism to implement some of those solutions. So I always find that the most valuable employees are not the ones that are going to come to you and complain about a problem, but they're going to come to you with an issue, and they're going to say, "This is what I think we should do about it." So they're going to come with not just the problem; they're going to come with the solution. Those are the folks that I believe are the most valuable to the organization.
So you're a continuous improvement guy, so that's intuitive to you. But how do you create a culture that welcomes that? I mean, is it who you hire? Is it training? I mean, how does it work?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it. I think with any change, I think human nature is, people fear change, right? You get comfortable in how you've always done it, and you hear that everywhere. Well, why do you do it like this? Well, we've always done it that way. Okay, that's fine, but what are we going to do tomorrow that might be different? And I've always found it's kind of like a three-legged stool. So if you're going to change anything, so one, what's in it for the employee? So if you're going to ask me to do something differently tomorrow than I do today, what am I going to get out of it? Is it going to make my job easier? Kind of selfishly, but if it's something that's going to make someone's job harder, they're probably going to push back on it a little bit. And then the other leg of the stool is what's in it for the organization, right? What's the organization going to gain from making this change? More profit, more throughput, that type of thing. And then the third one, and most important, I don't want to say most important, but the customer. What's the customer going to get out of this? Well, my part's going to arrive 2 weeks earlier if I do it
Mm.
differently. So I always try to look at any type of change as a three-legged stool. So if I'm going to change something and I can check those three boxes, it's going to make the employee's life easier. It's going to benefit the customer and it's going to benefit the organization as that three-legged stool, then it's probably going to stick. If I miss any one of those, stool is probably going to fall over and it's going to
Mm.
revert back to the way we used to do it. So I kind of think about it in that perspective. And then if you can check those boxes, it's usually something that's going to stick long term.
That's yeah, that's a good image. You said visual learner. That's the tool in my head that's helpful. I think workforce, yeah, I know we've talked, workforce continues to be a challenge for you. You mentioned some demographics, people retiring. It's great that you have that senior workforce. Our folks are seasoned professionals, all have 25 plus years experience. And then 5 years later, you have nobody with experience. So
Right.
workforce is an issue, and you can talk about that. But what are some of the other challenges that you're seeing? 2024, 2025, being a manufacturer here in Woodstock, New York.
Yeah. In New York, it's a lot of people, not cheap to live in New York. So
Sure.
we've lost a lot of folks, for a variety of reasons, heading south. There's no secret there. Cost of living is quite high in this region, this part of the world, if you will. So that's been a challenge for us. The other things, business has always been quite good for us because we're kind of a niche market. So it's not necessarily the orders coming in, it's more so the execution on the orders. We're one of just a few organizations that kind of play in the world in which we do fans, blowers, and motors used in the applications that they're used. So it's not so much that it's more so developing the new workforce and making it exciting for them and giving them a career path. We've had people here that have spent 40 years and they only want to learn how to wind a stator. They don't want to learn how to assemble the fan, or they don't want to learn any other skills, but they just want to do that one thing. And that's fine for some folks and they're comfortable in doing that. And that there's a place for that. We're trying to create a more dynamic workforce that's cross-trained to a level where, because of our vertical integration, there's times throughout the month or the year we need to move people around. So maybe you're working in the machine shop in the early part of the month, but then I need you to move over to final assembly to assemble a fan, or I need to do something else. We do have a handful of individuals that are cross-trained in 3 or 4 different areas. So they're really the most valuable employees we have because they can bounce around and pretty much do everything, which is key. So getting the folks that want to continue to enhance their skill set and have that capability to jump around from location to location, department to department are key. I would say the other thing that we're challenged with is to step into the 21st century and in respect to electronics. And when I say electronics, I mean visual workplace, TV screens, getting away from the old paper routers and the
Mm.
way we've always done it for 20 or 30 years here. There's comfort in paper with, some people see that, but, touch screens, doing it digitally, tracking, monitoring, all that stuff. That's probably been one of the biggest challenges for us, is to transition from the old way of doing it to the new way of doing it.
Mm. We were actually just at a company earlier this morning that makes material handling equipment, and they have a plate on the machine that has a QR code on it that any operator can scan and get the manual for it, just like the operators
Oh,
and,
great.
and all the troubleshooting guide, everything. It's like all in this one spot. So you never have to look for the manual. It's right there. You got your
Great.
phone. It's clearly the direction that we're all going. And that's interesting too. If some of that is
Yeah.
like, in that lean world, those visuals are really important. And
You
yeah,
got
why?
motion waste there, right? If you got to go
Yeah,
find the manual, you got to go find it on a shelf or in a cabinet or locked
yeah,
up somewhere versus just
right.
scanning it with your phone and
Yeah,
great. Yeah,
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And to talk about waste, I mean, having all that paper and the printer and everything else, I mean,
sure.
that is, like, how can we save money? Well, we can just have a screen with
Yeah,
the day's metrics on it. That makes a lot of sense. So, Chris, in the time we have left, let's talk just, big picture about Rotron. Largely defense contractor. Is,
hmm,
it's the business stable? I mean, is the challenge keeping up? Or, we read a lot in the papers about a lot of things being consumed in the
sure.
defense world. So,
Yep,
so
absolutely.
where are you guys at?
Yep. So yeah, the military side of the business for us is about 65-70% of the business. So that has been pretty steady even through COVID. That really didn't drop off at all. The commercial aviation piece of it did, obviously take a dive, but that has come back. And then getting into some new industries. I mentioned El Cajon with the PCB board
Mm.
manufacturers. So semicon, we've been dabbling in that, and that's an area that has grown a little bit for us as far as market share. But we're continuing to try to innovate and look for new areas in which our products will be applicable. The military is nice because when there's a new program or a new platform, the world is pretty small. And if they need to cool a new avionics cooling rack or a new whatever it might be, a new plane, there's only so many places they can go. And we've been in that industry for so long that a lot of times they'll call us, and we have quite a diverse catalog of different products that we can choose from. So a lot of times it's not a ground up build. We own the IP for most of our products. It's just a variant on our own design, what we're selling. So it's nice to be in that space where you control some of that type of information. But like I said, orders have not really been the problem for us. It's been more of just capacity and keeping up with the orders that we're receiving from our customers and continue to hire and bring in that next generation of manufacturer.
Well, Chris Rodrigue, Director of Operations at AMETEK Rotron, thank you very much for joining us today on the Council of Industry podcast.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.